Now, for more on this, we're now being joined by Mithali Nikor, economist and founder of Nikor Associates, live from Delhi. Welcome to the broadcast. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning. Hope you're doing well today.
Absolutely. Good morning to you too. Now, let me get straight to it. Can you tell our viewers why divestment is important for the government?
So I think, in order to understand this, let's look at a little bit of the timeline of what we mean by divestment and what we mean by privatization. So historically, India's economy has sort of been a economy where the strategic assets had to initially be set up by the government, strategic assets like the Steel Authority of India or the airports, companies which are supposed to run the airports or companies which are supposed to run any sort of large infrastructure facility, because in the 70s and the 80s, when these what we call commanding heights of the economy were being established, apart from the government, there was no other entity with the kind of capital to actually operationalize and maintain, these facilities. Over the last few decades, we've seen that the private sector has come in, private sector companies have come in, which can become airport operators, port operators, road operators, and of course, operators of these different entities, be it coal, steel, fertilizers, etc. So, of course, it makes sense for the government to reduce its presence in each of these sectors, and divestment therefore becomes a very natural strategy where a government can sell up to 100% of state owned entity. I mean, Air India is a great example where the government went ahead and sold 100% of the entity to the Tata Group. On the other hand, most of the sales we've seen in the last few decades have actually been divestment of a certain portion of that company's ownership to the private sector. So that makes it very important from an efficiency point of view, from an operations point of view, and profitability as well.
All right. So, what's your assessment of India's divestment goal? Do you think it's achievable or is it ambitious?
So if we look at the last 10 years data, actually it's very interesting. The Department of Disinvestment has actually released a very comprehensive data set of the last 10 years from 2014 to 2024, showing all of the transactions that have been done, for the disinvestment targets. Each year, the disinvestment target is set in the union budget. But in 2023, the government actually stopped setting targets. And the reason for that is that a lot of disinvestment activity had already taken place in the first 8 years of this process of disinvestment since 2014. And secondly, it merged the idea of disinvestment with asset monetization, where the idea is not only to just make sales but to see what is the most optimum way for the government to monetize its land assets and its companies that it owns. Disinvestment is only now one of the pieces of that strategy. If we look at the performance against the goals, in each year, there are 3 or 4 years where the government of India did very well in terms of meeting its targets. 2017-18 was one of those years where, large amounts of shares of different companies, almost 20-25 transactions went through, which is why those disinvestment targets were reached, and very high amounts of disinvestment were done in 2017-18. 18-19, 19-20, also good performance. But post-COVID, the activity of disinvestment has slowed down and asset monetization has gained pace.
All right. So, that being said, are markets expecting clarity on divestments during the budget speech?
I do think that markets expect announcements on asset monetization and disinvestment even now, because this is a buzzword. There is excitement in the market to see which of the assets can be monetized, which of the disinvestment, which of the companies may go in for disinvestment. You talked about IDFC even in your initial speech, but there are so many others. There is Coal India, there's the Shipping Corporation, there's more shares of Steel Authority that can be listed. The LIC IPO is also part of the entire asset monetization strategy. So I think markets always get excited to see what is the mode in which the government is now going to bring in the private sector into these commanding heights of the economy, as I said, and into this core business line. Because even if it goes for equity investments, opening it up to equity investment through an IPO, it still means that the markets can actually come in and, investors can take positions. And I think that is what excites the markets.
All right. Ms. Nikor, before we let you go, just for more clarity on this, how will markets react if divestment goals are not met this fiscal?
So the thing is that because the government has stopped announcing goals, in 2023, it gave up the practice of announcing a numerical goal for disinvestment. It just started saying, we are going to have a pipeline of asset monetization and listing a few of its intended, areas for asset monetization for the year. It kind of brings a little bit more stability to the process, because now it's not as though we are at the 2014 point where we have a number of companies to divest from. Now the positions are much more stable, and the government can definitely go on selling a larger and larger stake of its ownership in different companies, but 100% divestment of most companies is not on the cards. Therefore, it's given up the whole idea of target setting. So I think the markets will react positively when this pipeline is set.
All right. Well, Ms. Nikor, thank you so much for joining us on World Business Watch. It's always a great segment when we have you with us on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.